Hi everybody, hope you're all keeping well. My name is Emma Morrissey. I'm a fine artist and art tutor, and I am absolutely thrilled right now, I really am, to introduce to you this virtual exhibition that I'm doing with my good friend and fellow artist Sarah Fletcher. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about me and some of the artwork that you will see in this exhibition. We've been working very, very hard, the two of us, to create some inspiring pieces for you all. Not only just to give you something inspiring to look at, but also to give you some ideas to be creative and to use up different bits and pieces you have around your home, and to maybe start doing some arty things. Perhaps you might want to start a hobby, perhaps knitting or drawing or painting or writing. There are so many different things you can do to stay positive with everything that is going on right now.
Hello, my name's Sarah Fletcher. I'm what I like to call a bit of a creative generalist, so I do various kinds of creative things, from some songwriting to photography and illustration for my main output, which is my stories and poetry. And so Emma Morrissey and I wanted to put together something that would give you some entertainment and some enjoyment and some sense of connectedness, perhaps, in this time where we're all a bit isolated. And we wanted to make something that was kind of about the nice parts of being at home, so things that are familiar surroundings and maybe objects that bring back memories or help you to imagine things and be a bit creative.
So tell you a little bit more about me. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the process. So the process of creating these pieces basically started when I was going through some of the different things that I've got around the home and thinking, I don't really want to get rid of these things. I want to try and reuse them, upcycle them, recycle them into something new. And it gave me an idea for the piece Teapot Flower Pot, which is one of my art pieces that I created in watercolour and pencil. So I basically started thinking about all these different things that I can reuse, but also different things that would have affirmations on them, just to try and, remind people to look after themselves and their well-being at this time. So my pieces in this exhibition are a combination of pencil drawings, watercolour paintings and abstract pieces. I've got some illustrations in there as well. And my process, I've been doing art for a good 20 years now. But professionally, I've been doing it for 5 years, where I teach art and I create art pieces as well. And my process is a very organic one. I like to try and come up with ideas on the spot. I don't want to overly plan things because I want things to try and stay quite natural. So particularly when I'm painting, I might have sort of a vague idea, but particularly if I'm doing an abstract piece, I like to keep it very natural and very free-flowing and just allow the paint to go on its own journey,
In terms of my artistic process, I'm not a trained artist in the way that Emma is, so I've always really enjoyed visual art and I've always kind of practiced it, but mostly I'm fairly self-taught. At the moment, I really like to use watercolour and ink mostly. I tend to start with a bit of a pencil sketch underneath and then put something together with watercolour and finally put some lines on the top. Using a nib pen and ink. This kind of started out from something called Inktober, where you're encouraged to do an ink drawing every day, and you're supposed to just draw in ink and not start with any sketch underneath or anything, and it's kind of to get rid of those inhibitions and just get you to be brave and draw something. And sometimes it surprised me a lot how it would turn into something I was fairly proud of. There were obviously some that were a complete mess, and artworks don't always go to plan. I did do some for this exhibition that I haven't ended up using and ended up doing something else. So it is a bit of experimentation, but I do like to keep things fairly detailed, fairly realistic, and represent things that I really like in life, which often relates to tea, which I'll talk about a bit more in a minute.
So when I'm doing a watercolour painting, I might try the wet on wet technique, where I'll just wet the paper first and then put the paint down and see where it goes and just let it create patterns on its own. So I don't guide it a lot. So I really, really enjoy that process. When I'm drawing something specific and I've got a really specific idea in mind, perhaps I'm doing a portrait. I've been doing portraits for many, many years now. So if I've got something specific like that, I might be using a reference photo or something I'm drawing from life in front of me. And I observe a lot and I sit back and think a lot. And that's a lot of my process, is a lot of thinking, a lot of feeling. A lot of my pieces are quite personal to me and quite emotive. One of the other pieces I've done is called Fairy Tree, and I didn't have any references or anything at all. It's completely out of my head, and I just wanted to do something that looked sort of pixie-like, quite cute. I wanted some bright colours. I wanted it to be quite earthy and nature tones. So that was a big inspiration for my pieces in this exhibition. There's a lot of nature in there. There's a lot of trees in there. And of course, I've been spending a lot of time in the garden as well. So that sort of idea of hearing the birds singing and feeling the wind and feeling the sun, all of that I think has been inspiring me to do these pieces.
So Emma and I share a love for writing, so we've tried to include some written aspects in these visual art works. So we've got poems and affirmations and things as part of them. You'll notice that a lot of my artworks have to do with tea, or they do depict teacups or teapots, things like that. That's because tea has an unusual level of significance for me. It represents a lot of different things. So one of those is connection to my ancestors. I had a grandma who really loved her tea, and she shared that love with all of her descendants. So it's something that all of us share, and it's something I share with all of my family and friends back in Australia who are not with me here in the UK, and also something I share with my husband and with new people that I meet. So it represents kind of community and sharing. It's something that I will share with people as I get to know them. It also connects to imagination and creativity for me, because I'll often have tea when I'm doing something creative, and it kind of gives you that moment in your day to be still, which then can lead to some good thinking or coming up with some creative plans. It's a source of comfort, so it's definitely one of those familiar things in the home that can help you to relax and to take a breath. And tea cups and pots are something which I often repurpose in my life. And for me, that kind of represents the fact that if an object gets broken, if it's not perfect in some way, that doesn't mean it's useless. And this kind of relates to us as well, and how we all have imperfections that might actually make us more interesting or more capable of doing something unique with our lives. So I see that I have a lot of teapots and teacups that have been reused as vases or plant pots or receptacles. that also is a way of keeping those older objects as part of our lives.
One of the other things I've actually been doing is I've learned how to knit. So that became an art piece as well here called Knick-Knack, which basically, again, is inspiring people to think if you've got anything that maybe you've been wanting to do, but you've not had time, you've been so busy, and now we have time to sit and reflect and do things. So that's one of the things that I've been doing is I had loads of, balls of wool, and I thought I'm going to sit down, I'm going to make something. So that became inspiration for another one of the art pieces. So I've tried to include different things. So there's various different types of mediums being used. As I said, in my process, I try and be quite natural. I try to steer away from being too specific. When I first started drawing many, many years ago, I would do portraiture and portraiture only, and it was very structured. I didn't work with colour at the time, and I focused on portraiture for many, many years. And then I started to move away from it. I started to incorporate colour. I started to move to paint. And since that happened, I've been doing all sorts of things, and I work much more loosely now in terms of my art practice. And a lot of my artwork has also been incorporating some of my short stories and some of my poems, as I'm an author as well. So I wanted to try and incorporate some of my ideas, some of my short poems, positive affirmations, all sorts of different things, just to make the artwork pop a little bit more, to make it more inspiring, and just to make it more interesting to look at, really, and to try and have that combination. I've been doing many different types of art over the past 5 years now, where I've been doing art as a small business, in terms of art freelancing and teaching art workshops and art classes, and creating pieces of art, and also creating illustrations for published books as well. Not only my own published books, but some other local authors as well in the UK. So I've been very lucky to be very creative in many different ways, and I've been doing all sorts from working with pastels and getting used to what that material feels like, and using watercolor paint and acrylic paint and charcoal and chalk, and there's all sorts of different things. And I particularly like mixed media. So the majority of all the art pieces that you're seeing from me are all mixed media pieces. I think there's only a couple that are just pure pencil. A lot of them have got pencil and charcoal, or pencil and watercolor, or acrylic and pencil. So I like that combination of textures, and how when you go back to a piece of artwork, it becomes something completely different. You're working into it, you're working on top of it, you're adding more to it, and you're adding depth, you're adding physical layers of the medium you're using, but you're adding another layer to it emotionally as well. That's how I feel particularly. A lot of my pieces, as I said, are very personal to me, and I love to share that, and I love to try and inspire people. So I hope that's been interesting, to tell you a little bit more about how I work in terms of my process.
So some of my artworks here have some small haikus and other short poems on them. So you can pause and read those if you want to, but rather than read those ones, I'd like to finish up my narration with a bit of a longer one, which relates a bit to the kind of subjects we represented in the exhibition, and those ideas of connectedness through familiar and kind of at-home things. It's called Nourishment. A nourishing time of bread and conversation, of reassurance and tea, sips of compassion and fullness of empathy, our pot passed around with a smile, and acceptance for dessert. The rinsing of plates and the tipping out of the dregs, given in gratitude to the potato patch, where tomorrow's nourishment begins. The heat cooked upon passing warmth through our home and our bones, and the words on our lips, nourishing those beside us. So, at the moment, we're not really beside each other, but we can be by reaching out and connecting in different ways. And Emma and I hope that we've connected with you through some of this art, and that you've enjoyed watching and felt connected with each other as part of it. And we hope you'll come and talk to us about it in comments or in the chat with us after watching this. So thanks for coming along.